Hi, and welcome to my breakdown of triangle pose for yoga. Triangle pose or Trikonasana pose is probably seen as one of the beginner or basic poses of yoga. And in reality, it's actually a really difficult pose to get ourselves into. There's a lot of things going on. When you're in triangle pose, you're stretching from the legs into the thighs. You're stretching the back, the abdomen, all the way up into the neck. And you're also working every one of those areas too and strengthening them all at the same time. And why do we do it? Triangle pose is quite helpful for digestion. It also helps us ease stress. And as you work into it, it can also improve back pain. Of course, we don't want to fully throw ourselves into the pose if we're already having back pain, but as you build up that strength in the back and the core, it certainly can help ease back pain in the future. So we'll get started and look at how do we align ourselves in triangle. First, we'll talk about stance. Now, when I mean stance, I mean how far apart should your front foot and your back foot be? As we discussed in my Foundations of Yoga, Warrior 1 and Warrior 2, the stance between Warrior and Warrior 2 is different. Warrior 2 is wider to make extra room for the hip to open because it's a quite open pose. Warrior 1, however, you'll probably want that back foot in a few inches. And the toes are turned out in Warrior 1. It's just the same as you are in triangle. Triangle, you'll probably want about the same distance as you are in Warrior 1, because if your back leg is too far out, you're going to bend. You're probably going to get a little bit more bend up into the waist and not lengthen into the side of the waist as you should in the pose. So go ahead and bring that back foot in wherever you're starting from. If you're going from Warrior 2 into triangle, like we do in my triangle sequence that I also have posted this week, you'll find that in my Foundations of Yoga playlist as well. I take a moment to give you time to bring that back foot in from Warrior 2 and to make your stance a little shorter so that you have a better chance of having better alignment in your triangle pose. Take a look at the back side of the body and the back leg and the back foot. You have the toes turned out and generally in line with the knee. We don't want them turned too far in. You don't want them facing the back of the mat, but turned out just enough to where you feel comfortable. So having at a true 45-degree angle is not necessarily where everyone wants to be at. You may need to be a little bit more open. My toes almost face the left edge of the mat, and that's where I feel the most comfortable. Otherwise, there's too much rotation on my back knee. The back thigh, as you're in your triangle pose, should be rotating outward, and you're drawing the back knee up, feeling the activation in that back leg in your triangle pose. The front foot and the front leg, the front toes should be facing the top edge of the mat. Again, we want the front knee drawing up and feeling that action, that pulling upwards and pulling back. At the same time, you'll also feel the right thigh also rotating outwards. So we're feeling this opposing action now between the right and the left leg. You're feeling that energy pushing outward as you're pushing into all four sides of your right front foot, lifting up through the inner arch, maybe having a micro bend in that front knee so that we aren't hyperextending the front knee, especially if you happen to be hypermobile with a little bit more flexibility in your joints. Try to keep a micro bend in the front knee so that you don't cause extra pressure on the joint. Once you have your stance and your legs are situated, it's time to start bending. So this is where we think of bending from the hips. We don't want to bend from the waist and create very little lateral extension here. We want to bend from the hips. So we're shifting over, and in this case, it's over my right leg and downward. Now, most yoga teachers, I think many still cue that you're aiming to be like you're in between panes of glass and you're trying to shift this left hip back and in line with the right. That's almost just fundamentally impossible for our bone structure to do that. You will have the left hip slightly forward and the right hip pulled slightly back. We're just bending and allowing the torso to come above the right leg. If you have any pain in your SI, your sacroiliac joint, don't come down as low. We'll still keep the straightness, the length within our front leg and our back leg and also with our side body. Just don't come down as low so that it doesn't hurt your hips as much. Now we're bending from the hips and we're starting to come over that right front leg. The torso should be directly over the front leg and not falling inward. So we're not making a side body, we're not falling into our chest and coming to the inside of the right leg. We're coming straight down, keeping the length underneath the ribs here, and just coming down as far as we can. This is where a block can come in very handy to maintain that length in the torso. And you'll find more ease within the posture. So now we have our torso over the top of our right leg, and now we need to figure out what do we do with our chest and our arms. The chest should be open in your triangle pose, and you should be spinning those left ribs. If we're doing this on the right side, it would be the left ribs spinning open, catching some sunlight as you gaze up to the sky. The arms, there are many options for the arms. Traditionally in triangle, your left fingertips would be reaching towards the sky and gaze upwards. If your neck doesn't like this, though, you could take your gaze down and give your neck a little break. For your bottom hand and arm, again, it could be resting on a block, or you could take the block at a different position. If you are able to, you can take your fingertips all the way to the mat, to the inside or to the outside of the foot. And the option that I love is taking the hand to the inside of the shin and pressing the hand into the shin. There you will activate the core even more and build up that strength throughout the core and the back body. Now, another option would be also to take that hand that's up in the air and maybe take a bind behind you if your arm's getting a little tired, or you could just take that hand to your left hip as well and take note of what your hips are doing. Just one thing I would advise against is never taking your hand to the top of the knee joint. That'll place more stress onto the knee. You can certainly be much higher in your triangle pose and keep your hand to the inside of the thigh and bringing the left arm up overhead. Still focusing on creating length.